What's up, y'all a little faith, and welcome to episode number 24 of the Fagnostic Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hayes, and if I'm still giving you episodes, it means that I'm still looking for answers. Y'all, today's guest is Jennifer Knapp. Jennifer freaking Knapp. Anyone that grew up in the Christian church remembers her as being the starlet of contemporary Christian music in the 90s and early 2000s, with Grammy-nominated and Dove Award-winning albums. Shortly after experiencing these career highs, she announced a hiatus from her career. When she announced her return a few years later, she did so while also announcing herself as an out and proud lesbian and enjoying a lengthy committed relationship. As you can imagine, this stunned the Christian music industry as well as the fans of this incredible musician. She appeared on Larry King Live opposite Ted Haggard and a horrifically bigoted and seemingly misogynistic evangelical pastor named Bob Botsford. What a name. She graciously and patiently defended her faith and her sexuality on a world platform next to a man who was doing everything he could to denigrate her. The interview shocked even Larry King. Y'all, she blows my mind in this episode with how she's able to navigate such sensitive waters. She is such a gift to music, to her fans, and in this episode, to me. I hope you are as impacted by her heart and journey as I was. Welcome to the stage, Jennifer Knapp. Y'all, I am speaking and seeing Jennifer Knapp on my computer screen. I'm going to come undone. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here, Jennifer.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh. It's really my treat. Are you a believer?
I hate that question. Listen, I don't even like hearing that sentence. But what I'll say is this is one of the questions that I get is, how do I identify spiritually? That's probably the way I'd rephrase it. And I say, well, it's complicated, but my mother tongue in faith and spirituality is Christianity. So I am, I don't necessarily like going around going, I am a Christian, but it doesn't offend me if somebody says, oh, you're a Christian. I'm like, well, okay, it's my mother tongue. Like, it's complicated. Yeah. I'm an American, but I'm also an Australian. I'm a dual citizen, both countries, and I speak kind of both cultures fairly well, right? So Christianity is definitely my mother tongue. I don't know that I am particularly, enthusiastic about being a church-going evangelical model of that. That doesn't appeal to me anymore. But whatever that means, I'm still engaged in that conversation. I'm still driving that. So, I'm not as interested anymore of being capitalized, like Christian with a capital C, but rather trying to understand that religion and how much it's been influential to me, both in positive, negative ways, mine from it, and harvest from it, and in ways that are beneficial, and try and maybe influence the future in ways that might be beneficial to others as well. So
absolutely. And can you identify your pronouns as well?
Yeah, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I definitely identify as female. So
as someone who grew up in the church and just, jamming out to your tunes and like really feeling a catalyst to the divine through how you wrote and played, and then witnessing your journey really around the same time that I was starting mine in terms of coming out, I had so many feelings for and against you, because it was like I felt advocated for, but like in the way that I didn't want to be advocated for, you know what I mean? But now here we are, and I'm so appreciative of your honesty and vulnerability and your strength in the public eye to do and say all the things that you did. It means the world to me and to countless others I know.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a little bit interesting. I think most of the time where any of us are made by the circumstances that, we just kind of trip into, if I'd scripted it, I probably would have run just as fast as I probably could have away from any of that stuff. But it's kind of, I always call it like the frog in the pot. So you don't realize that the temperature's rising, right?
Right.
So that's your life and you have to live it. And so, I think the only thing that I can say about having that experience, just kind of looking back on it, was just that, at the beginning of that, when I kind of knew there was a gauntlet that I was going to have to go down, I just made it a mantra of just wanting to be positive and uplifting to other people that I knew were watching, like faces and names and people that I knew and loved. Like, so it was, just a really grounded experience knowing that, my family was watching while this was going on, that there were people that I knew that were still in the closet that were dear to me that were watching this go on.
People in the closet in the Christian music industry? What?
Yeah, I can't imagine, right?
No.
So I don't know, like it's really easy to be negative inside of those spaces. And I think in particular for LGBTQ plus folks inside of the church, we're much, especially at the time when I came out in 2010, everything you'd ever heard in and around the church and LGBTQ plus stuff was always this, pig pen, peanuts, storm of just black and dark. It was always controversy. It was always a question. It was always, negative and controversial and antagonistic. And yet, strangely, like in the, I had this private life where I'd felt uplifted and very supported by my friends and family. Yes, I had faith conflicts, but I was, took that as a long journey and didn't necessarily see that as antagonistic. I think when it came to the public conversation for me, what was really important and like the biggest decision I felt like I made at the time was just that I wanted everything that I did to try and be as positive and claiming of the space that I knew somehow, and I guess to use a charged word, I had faith would come. I wasn't going to apologize for making my space in the world. I was just going to live in my space and then talk about what that felt like to be in that space and to live through it. And I think the result was, look, when I look back, I'm probably the most proud of that, is not just making the controversy of, can I be gay? No, like, I'm already living this. Of course I am. Of course I'm gay. Of course I have questions about my faith that aren't always resolved. All right, if we're going to talk about that, let's be honest about it. And let's not necessarily paint this as something where I have to prove myself to you. No. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
I'm living my life. The rest of you catch up. And I think that, in the long run, I was really grateful that was, a positive experience for me personally. But I think in the long run, one, as far as the public conversation that I get, that's attached to my name and the things that I may or may not be responsible for. That was the thing that kind of makes me the most proud, is that it's not just this thing that LGBTQ people of faith need to make an excuse for themselves or justify who they are, but rather the glory is in when we're talking about and being visible and showing that we have just as fruitful and complicated lives as anyone.
Yes, exactly. You were talking about the frog in the boiling pot a bit ago, and like, you don't know that the temperature is rising until ... You end up on the panel with Larry King and Bob Botsford and Ted Haggard.
Right.
And I mean, that was a defining moment. I mean, obviously for you, but for Christianity and Christian music as well, and people who subscribe to that faith system. How did that get set up? I mean, was that, did you reach out to his people? Did they see what happened and reach out to you?
Yeah, in a weird way, if I recall correctly, it was CNN called me, and kind of what had happened. And after, I'd come out publicly and all the kind of media had paid attention, there was actually a journalist out of Atlanta, so CNN's office, out of Atlanta, that was familiar with the story and had written a couple articles. And as a result of the way that particular CNN article blew up, for some reason, LA said, oh, this would be great to do this as a thing, as a Larry King thing. So, I don't know how much Larry King really cared about the topic. The cynicism part of it is, I think, it's sold. It was a conversation that was buzzing at the time. Ricky Martin was coming out. Shelley Wright was coming out. In fact, one of the stories that I tell at the time is my media crew had actually bumped my coming out date for 3 weeks because the queue for people more famous than me were coming out all at that time. It's
shut up. That's so typical. I work in the LA side of entertainment, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But it's just
so
laughable.
Gross.
It's so gross.
But at the same time, like, there's trying not to be cynical about it, and even looking back at the positive thing this has done for a lot of people of faith. an LGBTQ plus conversation inside of religious spaces. I mean, it is meaningful to try and say, hey, let's actually have this conversation. And then for me on a personal level and a professional level, I actually, one of the reasons why I made the decision to come out and because it necessitated a public version of that was that I really needed people to know that, so that whatever they were going to decide, whether they're going to buy my music or not buy my music, they could do that with full clarity, that there wasn't any, me trying to like trick a bunch of Christians into buying my record or things like that. I wanted people to know and be on the up and up. It was an issue of integrity for me. So, the idea, it's so unusual to do this. Most of us don't come out that way, right? We don't discover our sexual orientation by flipping on a switch and then make a media broadcast out of it. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the professional side of it, when you're talking about people who do have public lives, there is that weird, unique moment where you have to disclose, make a decision to disclose. And I think particularly, and I'm not sure how this relates now as much now, but there is a sense, and that I think a lot of LGBTQ people will probably relate to, that if you don't disclose, you're in some way hiding. And so that disclosure moment sometimes becomes necessary to make a deliberate act in order to be able to preserve one's integrity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it was an, the Christianity Today article that referenced a letter you received from a fan that said, would you please come out publicly so that I cannot feel alone? And I imagine that must have like had some kind of impact on you, on seeing how people, they need, not, I hate to call them celebrities because that's a gross word too, but they need voices that have the strength like yours to kind of lead their path. You know what I mean? And it just broke my heart reading that reference, because it's the impact that I want to make in this world by, doing a podcast like this, or, whatever my career ends up being. But how many other, like after you came out, I know you got backlash, but how many letters and emails and calls did you get from people saying, you made me feel like I could have the talk with my mom. You made me feel like I could walk to school. And
that's wild. Of all the anticipation and nerves I had about coming out and that being, negative, and kind of open yourself up to that, I would say most of the communication I got was overwhelmingly positive. Either in, allies, but a good chunk of those were folks, particularly from faith-based communities, who had never seen a model of what was possible for them.
Yep.
That it's not to say that I'm a unicorn in any sense, but I think, it is a basic part, and there'll be psychologists out there that will know the term of the framework that I'm talking about, and it has a name, but we need to see those models in our lives. And even like one of the stories I tell as growing up in Kansas, it wasn't like there weren't gay people in my community. I lived in a small town, about 10,000 people. I could name the people that I probably suspected, but growing up in the late 70s and the 80s, there just wasn't what was available for me to see as what my future might look like or what I could aspire to be. It existed, but it wasn't visible.
Yeah.
And that kind of visibility isn't about celebrity. We're talking about the day-to-day experiences that we have as everyday human beings. We see modeled in our communities, modeled in our families, modeled in our church groups or our social circles at school. What we see matters. And to have those, to have folks being able to go, no, you're seeing this right. This is what I am doing. It's okay for you to watch are very important kind of decisions that we all get to make. And so to kind of extend that one step further, it's not an act of celebrity to do that. For every one of us that come out or share a bit of vulnerability about our experiences of what we're going through off of a microphone, there are people that are alongside you. There's a kid watching you. You don't even know that kid's watching you. There's a parent who's watching you, and you don't know that they're looking at you. And those are the things that we kind of take for granted. And I think, 10 years on in this conversation, what's amazing to me is the conversation of can you be gay and Christian isn't shocking to anyone.
Right.
Like people are bored, I think, by that question, but rather, starting to gain the ground of what I was hoping to see 10 years ago, which were LGBTQ plus people living their lives in the diversity. And that includes spirituality.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I loved and laughed about that interview, I mentioned it before we hit record, because I watched this interview live 11 years ago, and I went back to revisit it last night, and I forgot that Ted Haggard was going to be on there. And because Bob Botsford is, I mean, like, you had such a grace for how you handled Bob as well. I was like shaking with how he spoke to you, how he wouldn't look you in the eye, how he shortened your name. I mean, it was just all these things that were so demeaning and misogynistic and just typically evangelical. And he was trying so hard to rattle you, and yet you still maintained this calm demeanor in representing yourself and your POV. And it just, you could tell that it rattled him as a result, so much that they then brought on the Ted Haggard, who was shockingly like a little advocating for you, and was definitely the middle ground between you and Bob. It was wild.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild experience, I gotta say. Like I'm appreciative that folks thought I looked. It's nice when you're on television to not look like a hot mess.
Sure.
But I remember I will never forget, like I actually had a show later that night in Orange County. So I went from LA and had to hop in a car and then make a beeline right for the show. And so I was by myself because my advanced crew and all my music crew, I had like basically two different crews in two different cities. And then I was bouncing between the two of them. So when everybody loaded me in the car after that interview, I'm sitting in the car finally by myself after like 5 hours of a hurricane. And I just sat there just shaking like a cold, wet chihuahua and just freaking out, going, what the hell just happened? I mean, the inside stress of that experience was brutal.
Yeah.
But to be able to just, like for me, again, part of that was just going, I will not cede my ground to my dignity. I will not cede my ground to the way that, I want to be spoken to, like not in an arrogant way, but just like, gosh, man, I'm a human being.
Yep.
And to be able to kind of take that and not scream about how aggravating and demeaning it is to be spoken to poorly, and to just calmly have to, that takes so much energy to have to do that. It hurt. It really hurt.
I hate that you had to go through that, but it's especially women have a different standard than men in how they respond to men. And I'm so thankful that you had the calmness about you to deliver this message, because because of that, it was just so much more effective. When he was speaking about Bob Botsford, who's still a head pastor of and I went down the rabbit hole last night with these people. Is he still
pastoring
a church called Horizon Christian Church or something like that? That how my favorite thing about Southern Baptists right now is when they take out Baptist from their church name, because they don't want to appear to be what we all know of as Baptists to be and act like, to try to treat people to be like, oh, we're a little more like on the cutting edge of like progressive, come and join us. But then you look at like what they believe in their church. It's so disgusting how they reference their view on marriage and on women. Those two items specifically were in their Churches About Us. And it's so like around the bush. And I'm like, why don't you just say what you believe? We're going to hell and women should submit. That's literally what your church bio says, but like in a very sweet, evangelicalized way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that was like, for me, like in Christian culture, because I wasn't raised in that environment. It was an adopted faith for me in a lot of ways. I think that was, and even to this day, I think is, even with like LGBTQ issues, or, as a woman, I've got plenty to say on, on even more to say sometimes on how Christian culture, approaches gender and sexual orientation across the board. I think the thing that was always confusing to me was the yeah, like the slight and not the open-handedness with which this was talked about. I mean, I think there was, and I will say in my discipleship early on in the church, there was an expectation of submissiveness of women, not necessarily like there weren't conversations about there were concerns expressed by people that were discipling me at the time going, oh, you're like kind of tomboyish, aren't you? Like you need to kind of calm that down. Like you're going to have to submit to your husband. And it wasn't in some kind of Handmaid's Tale kind of submission, but it was definitely this idea that the man was going to be in charge of making the ultimate decisions in the household, and that I was supposed to be sitting on chicken eggs and hatching, the chicks and those kinds of things. And I just looked at that and going, okay, well, at least that's direct. But there were all these kinds of other subliminal things in and around that. It wasn't really, it felt like I was being groomed for that and trying to be convinced that this is what was happening, rather than going like that was something that I ever actually really wanted to do, or that was anything that we were all actually kind of invested in together. It was just something that was being taught that I don't know. It was a weird kind of cultural affect that was, and sometimes really direct and other times implied that you were going to be a good Christian or loved by God if you did these things successfully.
And that's what most of us
really
did.
Weird.
That's what most of us did to survive in the church, by knowing that we are something that is talked bad about, and this attraction in us is deemed as a sin and hellbound. And so we do these extra things. Like for me, it was, I was pursuing ministry. If I could be that much more Christian, then maybe it'll take care of what's inside me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm always like really fascinated because like sex and gender and social, how we socially weave together is already like complex and amazing and diverse and complicated. And there's some real laws of attraction, right? The things that we want to do to attract somebody to love us. We are not, in one hand, it's really simple. On the other hand, it's really complicated. Yeah. But it gets really kind of crazy when we embed these things into our dignity and worth, and we start couching these in spiritual conversations, and what God will love and what God won't love when you don't behave. I mean, it is so, one thing is clear, and as you kind of live in that social structure, one thing becomes clear is that it actually isn't fruitful for a lot of people to see the kind of damage this does when we're living contrary to finding something within ourselves that's actually honest about where we're at, being able to seek out relationships that are beneficial to us and we can be beneficial to them, to another. These aren't necessarily scripts that you can mandate from someone else external to make this happen. Yeah. So that's where it gets kind of really weird. And I think to be able, I think the jig has kind of been up for a while now inside of faith-based communities going, what are we really doing here? Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to talk about, what is submissiveness? What does that really mean? What does it mean to be in service to another human being? How far do I go in service to that other human being before I'm damaged, taken advantage of, abused, assaulted? I mean, these are very serious questions that have not just been, I think they've been boiling up in faith community for a long time. But I think as we watch the world around us, we see how dangerous it can be when something so essential to our core dignity is being loved by God, whatever you name God as, whatever the ultimate carer, creator thing is that is undeniably 100% in your corner about, your fullness and your fruitfulness, how damaging it is when, I don't think you even have to be a believer of any kind. When I say God doesn't love you, what does that mean? It's an absolute existential insult.
Yeah. Yes.
To say you don't matter
with lifelong ramifications.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just discovering, oh, I don't need that narrative. Because when that narrative is, like you said, so embedded in us and you chose this lifestyle of religion, so that's on you, girl. But for me growing up, and most people growing up in it from infancy,
when you're hearing it every day. I made a short film a couple of years ago called Cognitive, and the stick was the little boy thought he had AIDS at like age 8, because at age 8, I thought I had AIDS because of what the church taught. And so when people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would be like, I'd say like something, but in my mind, I knew that I wasn't going to grow up. I just knew at 8 that I was going to die someday soon. It could be tomorrow. And that's what churches are doing to these kids by just not allowing their faith system to evolve. And you kind of hit on it in that interview. It's I think it was Bob saying something to the effect about how experience doesn't validate scripture validates experience, or something along that line. And maybe it wasn't those words, but it was just basically like saying like your life has to be dictated by scripture. But yes, the scripture has changed words, has changed translations over time. I mean,
the Bible is sacred text, and as a litmus test for humanity is kind of a weird way to approach. I mean, it's idolatry. For me, that's like in a truly theological point, that's an idolatry of the sacred text, rather than understanding, an argument I would make, for a theological argument I would make, is that that humanity is a significant creation of God. It's not, at least in the narrative and from our perspective, we're saying we're not accidents to some degree in that space, right? And so it was, we're not here to live as automatons into some other, great mechanism, but rather to flourish. Like, this is a creation that's planted like a seed in the ground to grow, to be a wonder and a joy and an amazing thing. Experience does matter. And to think that we're all just here to live into one scripted experience is counterintuitive to everything that we see in the world around us.
One specific experience. It's a man's. I mean, it's right. So, I mean, that's the thing too, is that it's men telling women, this is how your experience has to be played out. Or a straight man telling a gay man, this is how your experience has to play out. It's just evil.
Well, I think at this point, I don't contest that there is a lot of negative things. Here's where I'll be a little bit more optimistic, perhaps, than where you're at, Matt. Is that
what makes you say that, Jennifer?
No, and I think with good cause. I think you call evil, you call negative and bad and detrimental things for what they are. And this is a conversation I've had in contemporary Christian music on a couple of different levels. But there's a certain point where when we persist in something that we know causes damage, that's when we start to become incredibly responsible for this. I think we can, I don't think all along there's been, the wringing of hands and the plotting to destroy ourselves in what many people are just, your parents probably just genuinely wanted you to experience faith, to have a fruitful life, to have, the grace of God, whatever that means, to be able to have something that's meaningful to you spiritually, something in us, they wanted to do the best thing they could.
Absolutely.
That they knew how to do to hand that down.
Absolutely.
The problem is, like that example of like when a parent kicks their kid out out of the entire nest for being gay, or even worse, encourages their downfall, their destruction. Like, when you get to that point, that's where we should be scratching our heads going, is this a good thing for us? Is this belief an accurate thing to teach and transmit? Is this belief actually beneficial for our growth? Is this actually making us in any way closer to divinity at all? And that to me is when I put folks on task to say, listen, all right, I can give a little bit of grace for a while to say these things maybe we didn't know for a long time. Maybe I didn't realize for a little while that my entire world had a narrative male white voice. And when the moment that you realize things like that, that's the real moment where you go, I am going to participate in learning, in changing, in asking questions, to stop being an agent of something that is clearly detrimental to others. Like that to me is like, and for me, that's something that I learned through my faith. It wasn't that, like okay, you want to quote, like say something Christian-y, like all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Well, yeah, sure. We all screw up. But what happens in those moments when you realize that you're causing damage to another? What happens in those moments when you realize you could have done something different? Just do something different that makes your life a little kinder to someone else, that makes the planet a little more cared for, makes another life seem significant. These are things that I wouldn't, for all the things that I could say about bad theology or the way that I've ever been treated or the misogyny that comes in, so a lot of the things that the faith tradition teaches, it's really hard to get around the fact that it's in those moments where you have a decision to look at something and say, here's the hard part. People are going to be pissed at me, but I'm going to change a bad tradition. I'm going to be there and I'm going to change my own behavior. I'm going to be responsible for that. And what kind of human being do I want to be? And that to me is like, that makes it hard, right? In the longer conversation, at least, it makes it harder for me to go, I don't want to write the whole thing off. I think the endeavor to some degree is significant, but the challenge for anyone who continues to champion that and wants to be identified as a capital C Christian, then that means at this point, you're now on notice to understand the kinds of patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, bad theology that has literally destroyed lives, colonized nations, destroyed a planet. These are very serious things. And if you're very serious about the capital C, then you have to do the capital A, which is act.
Jennifer, you're fucking fascinating. I'm going to insert a round of applause after that spill. No, you hit the nail on the head. And you also answered my next question, which was basically, especially because you adopted into this religion. Why did you stay around after all this started to crumble for you, as opposed to run and maybe either find another faith system that worked and more aligned with your POV? But that's what you exhibited is real strength. You saw this system that has done good for you and done good for your worldview. And your worldview is even dictated by how you perceive and interpret this faith system. So you stuck around and put people on notice. That's why you stayed in this religion. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I don't see at the same time. I don't know if I've stuck around. Like I'm really dubious as to, like I understand like there are theological positions that I have. I'm going to talk like an academic for a second. Like I know there are theological positions that I have in a great many denominations would actually disqualify me for being a true Christian. Like religiously speaking and theologically speaking, there are some things that are kind of mandatory things that you have to carry. And one of the things I go like, okay, I'm not a Baptist. Like I'll never be a Baptist. Like maybe that's heartbreaking for some people, right?
Right.
Because that means you're missing the culture, the community. I didn't have that. So that doesn't really bother me to lose that. I'm not that interested in being a religious person. Like I don't get a lot from lighting candles, even though I like from time to time a good liturgy. It's a really complicated thing, but the thing that bewilders me even personally is like I don't know how to turn this off. Like I still care about people. I know that there's something, maybe it's better suited for my conversation as a creative person. I understand there's something about the human spirit. There is that song in all of us that has no voice. It's just a melody. It's the wind. It's to me like some of the beauty that I see in the sacred text of the Bible, where it's just like, what do we call it? It's the wind, it's spirit, it's this. It's not even, we don't even call it God anymore. It's just this thing. And you take that away from us and all of a sudden we're wandering and we're empty. And so I understand that. I look for languages that help me see that. I think there are metaphors that do relate. if I grew up in the Middle East or in Asia, that language and that tongue might be different for me.
Yeah.
It is one that is embedded somehow. Like I dream in English because I've spoken English all my life. It would be a really hard task at this point to learn a new language.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't challenge my vocabulary to grow, that it doesn't mean that I don't question my own culture, my own people, my own behavior, and not just for some sake of entertainment, but for something in a sense of going, I don't know. I like to go out and camp in nature, leave the campsite better than you found it. It's not that hard.
The way that you articulate these things is like mind blowing. I just love that. You took a hiatus before you came out as gay. How did because the Christian music industry also, you kind of touched on it earlier, has a grooming effect on the artists. And some of them don't even choose Christian music. They just find that that's where the money's going to come, that they kind of like place you there on a record label, like, oh, that's going to be your market. Go there. Yeah. So what was it like? Because did you always have same-sex attraction, or did you realize that one day?
Nobody ever believes me when I say this, but I was a late bloomer. It wasn't until I kind of had my first love when I was 27 that the light bulb finally went off for me. I was just like, oh. And then when that light bulb went off, I was like, oh my God, that makes way more sense. Right. Like, how dumb could I be? But it was kind of a weird thing. Like, I'm not, even when my mom outed me to myself, strangely, I was, I guess, essentially dating my now wife. And she was like, you two are a thing? And I was like, oh yeah, oh shit, yeah, I guess we are. Like, I'm just that thick sometimes, I guess. So it didn't really occur to me for a long time. And it wasn't until I decided to leave the Christian music industry that I realized how I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what decisions I earnestly wanted to make for myself. I didn't know what I wanted to be responsible for. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yes,
it's like, the gay thing wasn't really a question for me at that point. Like, I already had thoughts about, like, theologically, like, when other people were living this life, when I met other queer folk out and about and on the road, like, I just could not tolerate anyone saying like somebody gay was going to hell. Like, I just was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of the purity movement that's going on here. I am beside myself with the gender crap that's going on here. All those kinds of things I already had issues with.
You mean this purity movement of this is my y'all can't see it, but I just pulled out my True Love Waits certificate that I my desk is riddled with like all like sorts of religious books, and I have my high school Bible, and I have this True Love Waits ticket that I have signed that I'll stay pure until marriage to a woman. God. Of course.
How did that work out for you?
Well, I'm going to give you a list of people to ask.
But that's the crazy thing is, like, I didn't, I had my own thoughts privately about other queer folk, and I didn't have a negative feeling or a theology to get over with that I just bought. I didn't buy it as a woman who had had sex before marriage. I wasn't buying it for queer people. I just didn't yet have that experience to live out on my own. And I didn't know what I was willing to be responsible for, but I did know it was going to be serious enough that I had to have my shit together, and that wasn't something I necessarily even wanted to share with folks. So, I mean, I didn't leave CCM to be gay, but when I left CCM, I was just like,
CCM, just so y'all know, is contemporary Christian music.
Yeah. I didn't leave my career as a performing, Christian. I didn't leave that career because I was gay. I left that career because I had so many things that I was starting to get so pissed off about, and I was having a really hard time being quiet about. I was 27 years old. I was starting to develop my own theological thoughts and my own things that I wanted to be responsible for. And that I took seriously my responsibility for that. So I wanted to make sure that what I was saying and what I was going to do, if I was going to do them at all, were things that were in tune with what I was going to be willing to be judged for. Like, yeah. I didn't, like, somehow in my gut, and the True Love Waits movement's a really great example of when I was probably in my mid 20s, 23, 24, about that time, and starting to get quite a bit of notoriety, right? Of being this, when you become like, especially as a female, I don't know what men would say inside of contemporary Christian culture, but when you become a famous, young, attractive woman inside of a Christian community, you all of a sudden become a model of virtue, whether you're virtuous or not, whatever virtue means, right? So I was on the cover of Brio magazine, and people were asking me to write devotionals on purity and, singing songs. I'm like, you guys know that I slept around quite a bit before I got here, right? Like, I know, I have been around the block. Like, you guys are shaming the hell out of every girl who's ever seen a penis, every boy who's not into boobs. Like, you're just like, you guys are trashing adolescent puberty right now. You're
setting them all up for failure.
I wanted to kill myself when I ran through this jungle. I'm not dead. I am not going to be a part of this being worse. Like, I just didn't want to be a part of it. I mean, I lost money even during my career because, like, oh, well, you'll get paid well. You'll become, you can take the mantle of the queen of Christian music if you want to. Just sign on to the purity movement. And I'm like, no. Like, I cannot tell a young girl that she's going to hell, or a young man who's jerking off like 3 times a day, that God doesn't love them. Like, this is not good. This is not doing anyone any good. Like, this isn't even good sex education. Like, no. It's just bad all the way around. So I didn't want to be a part of that. And those were kind of the things that, for me, like, when I kind of started to take my leadership, I mean, I already took it seriously, but by the time I was 27 and not being able to just smile and nod my way out of the room, and I'm just getting pissed and mad and angry, and I just, like, I needed to take off. And so the added bonus for me was to be able to take a break and go, you know what? I'm just going to go live my life. I'm going to see who I want to be for myself, and take a time to retool. And if I never come back to this part of the world, great. And if I do, well, don't tell me about it now, because I may not work on myself very much. But.
And you went to, I mean, because you spent a lot of time in Australia as well. What did you see as the differences between American evangelical? I hate that word so much, I can't even say it consistently. American evangelicalism and, let's say, Australian evangelicalism.
Actually started after I left CCM, I took a lot of time in traveling. So I spent a year traveling. I spent a year between traveling the States and like 6 months traveling the States. I spent 6 months traveling in Europe before I eventually moved to Australia. And I lived in Australia for 6 years. One of the things that I discovered in Europe actually was, I mean, there's tons of like cathedrals, tons of religious art all over Europe, right? And if you mean anything, if you mean to see like a local area at some point in time, you're going to run into religion, like Christianity. Yeah. And I think one of the things that was really interesting to me when I kind of took it in, like, I would go into a religious space just really mad. Actually, at that time, I remember just going, I hate this, but I'm not going to not go into Notre Dame. Like, right. I'm here, like, don't be a jerk. Like,
why are you so pretty?
And I wanted to be mad and angry, and I was mad and angry, but at the same time, what became distinct to me was exactly that. It's like, oh, wow. Like, the Christian conversation is different here. The Christian conversation is different when you're talking to somebody in the 1500s, in the Reformation period. And I began to ask myself questions like, oh my God, like even when you travel around the States, and I think for people who travel inside of faith, travel in America, if you do work in a religious community inside of America, and you go to the Northeast or the South, and which South? Did you go to Florida? Did you go to South Carolina? Did you go to Louisiana? Did you go to Texas? Those are different Souths.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They're different Midwest, the Rust Belt, the Rust Belt in Ohio and kind of lower Michigan to the Midwest where I grew up in Kansas. You travel around these different places, and what you begin to realize is that we're all like wildly different. We have a wildly different perspective. But in particular, if you look at America en masse, I think it's an accurate statement to make. American evangelical stuff. And then you get to Australia, totally different.
Yep.
Well, I don't even know how to relate to an evangelical in Australia. I'll be honest, because it's not my culture. I think that was actually helpful for me religiously in a lot of ways to realize how cultural our faith is, that it's not just this monolithic, universal, religion. Christianity is not. Like, I actually started to like read about, oh my gosh, like how many different denominations are there in Christianity? And it's actually growing. It's growing all the time. The last time I looked, which was better than 10 years ago, is over 34,000 different denominations in the world and growing at a rate of like, upwards of 100 a year. Like,
that's crazy.
So how can you say that, what do you mean when you say I am a Christian? Or are you a Baptist, a First Baptist, a Second Baptist, an Anabaptist,
Free Will Baptist? Yeah.
And we haven't even got through the whole list of Baptists. So
right.
It's, to me, it shortchanges even God's possibility, how, again, like however you imagine God, whatever God is, and whatever our one's approach to divinity might be, it's really shortchanging like this ultimate, like Paul Tillich called, the divinity ultimate. And I love that thing, because it's an open-handedness with which we see the possibility of what we're trying to articulate. And if we ever think that it's going to be possible even to perfectly live that inside of the four-wall, the four-wall box of a church, or that we have any capacity to be kind to one another in a four-wall box with never moving out of it. Like, all we know as human beings, every time that you just put, all of us in a room cramped together, what do we end up doing? We end up eating our own young. I mean, we're terrible at it. But when you open that up and you allow us to prosper, you allow us to kind of see our fullest potential, allow ourselves to dream, to imagine, to fail, to, I think that, to me, when I started to kind of get a picture of the wider world and understand that Christianity isn't at all what I thought it was, actually made me be a lot more graceful back toward myself for the experience I'd had inside of that tradition. It gave the language back to me, even though I've been able to adjust that language. So I know that, I would put you on task a little bit for being negative against a negative religious experience. I say, go for it. There's no loss in that. I think we have to be honest with where we're at. But I think one of the endeavors that I have as well with other folks when I'm talking through this is to go, if you need to leave, leave.
Yeah.
If it's not good for you, it's not good for you. Find a language that speaks and connects to where you need to be, but don't give up on you. Don't give up on finding the love and the relationships that are meaningful to your prosperity, because we are ultimately connected to one another in some way.
Yep.
How we get to connect that, I don't get to define that for you.
Yep.
But what I will be for you as a friend who says, what language do we need? Let's go find it. Let's find the tradition. Let's find the ritual. You want to burn paper, you want to write all your dreams on paper and burn them up and send to the sky. Give me a match. I'll help you do it. The things that allow us to find friendship, social liberation, creativity, those kinds of things are to me the joy of our possibilities. And the challenge and the critique I have inside of our religions is when the religion becomes the idol, when the religion becomes the endeavor rather than the other way around. Religion, for me, should be a tool that allows you to find something that's existentially hard to hold. A religion symbolic of where we need to be. And if that tradition needs to change, we grow, we change. What we need to communicate, those symbols change. Our fashions change over time. We have to be willing to be unfashionable for a season to be able to find our new couture.
Oh my God. Again, I say the way you articulate is just mind blowing. It just, everything you say just clicks a little bit. She's given me so many zingers. I don't know what I'm going to list when I post this. What would you say to the Bob Botswords, the Ted Haggards, the Bob Stiths, the people who are still kind of running the show on the large scale? What would you say to them knowing that they are serving people in their congregation information that is harmful to them? Like what's your message to them?
Yeah, I mean, my first just critique is like asking the question, are you really serving? I think those are, man, I'm kind of biting my tongue for the critiques that I know I could give and go, all the things that, in my opinion, one is doing wrong in those kind of spaces. But I think rather than being, angry about it, that's what questions are you asking yourself? Like, how are you really serving your community? Like, and what kind of, if you're an authority, what are you an authority of? And what does authority mean to you? If authority means being a tyrant, then you're going to your theology, if you see theology as God as a tyrant, you see God's authority and God's power as something that colonizes, then you will be a colonizer. You will be a tyrant. So what does it mean to have authority? Like, I want to have authority, right? I want to have authority as a creator. I want to have an authority as somebody who speaks about faith. I don't want to rule you. I want you to be able to trust me. I want that authority to be reflective of something that has potency and reliability, consistency, even though it may not have certainty. So the Bob Bots for the world, or anybody pastoring a church, or anyone in a position of leadership, those to me are the questions that we should ask. I'm not an authority on it. I don't want to lead anything. I genuinely don't want to lead anything. It's a big deal to be responsible for that.
Yeah.
If you're going to teach, what are you teaching? And are you teaching, what are you teaching in a way that's actually in service? And every teacher deals with this, right? Are you going to do it my way? Or am I going to facilitate you to figure out the way that you need to learn so that you will have this and you will have mastery of what I'm just opening the door. I'm leading the way. I'm walking beside you. I'm helping you sort it out. I'm helping you customize your own education to a degree, right? Those are the ways that I think we can revolutionize the way that we should talk and share about our faith. So I don't know if the Bob Botsfords of the world, I don't want to shame this guy.
Sure.
There's a certain point where I believe that I hope that through those experiences, we can continue. Any of us have the potential to go, oh, wow. I genuinely hope that you can look up someday. And like, I even do this when I'm playing on stage for, I'm a musician at the end of the day. I play songs. I want you to feel good, but I still know that I'm standing in a spot that what I never want to lose the idea that even like right now, we have a microphone and somebody's going to hear me. And what I have to say, I want to not lift. I don't want to put anyone down. I genuinely don't. I genuinely hope that somebody will find something that liberates themselves from their own shame, from their own sadness, but not just selfishly, but that you become, that any of us become lifted up by another so that we then in turn may lift up another and another. It is, I'm going to like throw up a little in my mouth. To me, it's so Christ-like in that sense.
You're right. You're right.
That to me is something inside of, whether this is true or not, I don't even know. Like I have no stake of saying that Jesus is real or Jesus is not real. But I think even if you just look at the metaphor of what we aspire to, that's what Jesus is wildly symbolic of, is our potential to be extraordinarily decent, loving, and liberating to other relationships that we're in.
You just gave me chills. That's such.
What does that mean for divinity?
Yeah.
I don't care anymore. Because I'm going to work to be the best human being I can be around us. So who are you serving? That's what I would ask. What does authority mean to you? Who are you serving? What does power mean to you? These are questions that in any leadership position, I think we should all ask, regardless whether we're leading in a church or not.
Yes. I have one more question, but you kind of just answered this one as well. What would you say to the divine were they standing before you?
Look away. Some smart ass thing of which I won't get back. I don't know. I don't know that there's a way that, to me, divinity is comprehensible in one thing. Like,
yeah.
there's no standing before. I am immersed in, like, that's the way I see the world. Like, I am, as much as my room is filled with oxygen, my room is filled with divinity. That's the way I want to see the world. I want to see the world in a matrix of I am part of and within divinity.
God damn, that's good. Ah, I just wish I was as smart as you to
It's
say.
not smart.
No, but no, but I mean, I want you to recognize that, like, you're a songwriter. This is your jam, like, no pun intended. But those are the ways that I need Christianity specifically explained to me, are those phrases. And I cannot tell you, I mean, this is episode 24, and I plan on because I love talking to people about all things religion and faith, but you have really, really not only diagnosed what I could not figure out after 30 years of dealing with this, but like the very things that I'm critical of, I can be an example of what I wished I had been taught by reading the metaphor. I mean, I don't even know how to say it. My mind is blown right now because of how you have really translated some things in my head. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah. Okay. You're welcome. I hear my wife right now telling me to just say thank you, but
oh my God,
it is genuinely, for a lot of, I know that, like, in the last few years, like, deconstruction has been a phrase, but
yeah.
I think a lot of us have been, I'm pushing 50 now. A lot of us are now full grown. Like, I say a lot of us because I'm thinking about, like, particularly of American kids, particularly in the 90s, of which I participated. We were all kind of part of this movement to either double down on the religion that our parents bequeathed to us, or we're caught up in the tidal wave, like me, of going, oh, wow, this can be really cool and meaningful thing to have faith. And then in our development and in our growth, now that we're all in our, like, this kind of generation in the 30s and 40s, and we've become adults and go, wait, shit ain't working. It's not exactly like you said. I'm mad as hell. This thing's broken. This thing's legit bad. What do I do with all this stuff? And, I think there have been some really helpful people that have narrated through that. But I think also, if I had a critique of the mechanism or the commercial success that Christianity had inside of America, what we really lacked were those people that actually were willing to sit with us and dive in to seriously just, what happens when the metaphor doesn't resonate for me? What, I remember one time, like, here's what I would say. Like, people ask me if I believe in God. In the world that I grew up with, I remember, like, the day I was on a microphone I think I was at a creation. I'm pretty sure I was at a creation in a press conference, and somebody asked me if I still believed in God, because I was starting to be a little pissed and people were starting to pick up on it. I was like, you know what? Today I don't. And the whole room just freaked out just because I just said it. Like, today I don't. Some days I do, some days I don't. My goal isn't to believe in God. My goal is to have a journey. This is the language, I was starting to kind of piece together this kind of thing. What I hope, what my critique of what we've experienced, particularly inside of our American culture, is we're not actually having this kind of conversation. To me, this is what church is. We're getting together and we're talking about, what does the world look like? What does divinity look like? What did it look like to you today? What did you see? It's not right or wrong. It's not me trying to teach you something so that I will convince you what to believe, but to be part of a dialogue where we encourage one another to just keep going for it, to be existentially significant, to be
significant.
No, we are.
Yes.
And that's, you don't have to be a guru or a card carrying, evangelical to do that. We're all trying to do that.
Yeah.
The best way that we know how.
Yep.
And for me, inside of all of this deconstructionist experience, I would say it's just because I'm a Pollyanna and I genuinely want world peace. Like, my hope for anyone is that you find joy. My hope for anyone is that you find true peace, peace, lasting, confident, not confidence like I'm awesome, but confidence as whatever comes next, I'm okay with. Like, I can do this. If that means walking away from your faith, then do that now. But what I would encourage you as you walk away is to not walk away just because you're pissed, but to walk away because you need to recover, because you need to take care of yourself, that you need to, care for your person and your being. So make that decision for yourself. If you need to come back, then come back and meet and convene with the people who are going to help you and nurse you on that journey. Be judgmental and have high expectations of those you want to lead you. Demand more of your mentors. Ask your mentors to show up for you and ask them to be responsible. Will you be a mentor for me? Those kinds of things we can all be in one way or the other. To me, that's church, not that's the aspirational part of what I feel like is essentially a Christ-like message.
You're correct. You're exactly correct. And thank you for pointing that out. This has been such a fantastic conversation with you. I cannot wait to see what people think about it, because my listener base is all people who have these same questions and anger and fire inside them that I have. And I know that it's going to make an impact. What are y'all doing for Christmas?
I, with a great deal of excitement, am driving back to the Midwest. So I'm going to go hang out with my family in Kansas after COVID years and just, I think last Christmas, I probably had my Christmas dinner with just me and mine and a TV dinner, so I'm really grateful to be able to see my vaccinated family. They're all healthy and well. And maybe I'll go sit on a couple of horses and eat some fresh chicken eggs. I'm super excited.
Yes. Well, I have my Christmas party that I host this year, and everyone's required to be boosted and vaccinated, obviously. But I made the playlist yesterday, and your Christmas album is on it. And I'm so excited because it's just like soulful and easy and like it's one of my favorite Christmas albums. So I'm excited for my people to hear it as well. Thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate your grace, your knowledge, your articulation, your faith in people, and you're humoring me and my negativity about
I love
all those things.
I love it. Keep on rocking, man. It's great. You be you, man.
Yes, you as well. And I will let you know when I'm in Nashville because I owe you a good drink.
Hey, you're a Scotch drinker?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, buddy. All right. Well, you might just have to come over to the place because I've got like a little bar working out here.
Oh,
so
deal.
I don't pay for Scotch anymore.
Oh, wow.
No. I don't go out and pay $20 because I'd rather put it in a bottle that I can sip for hours on ends.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we'll have to, at least next time we meet, wherever we are, it's flasks or bottles or something. It'll be great.
Deal. I can't wait. Y'all have a good Christmas and New Year. Okay.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Matt.
Bye, Jennifer.
And all the people said, gay men. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Fagnostic Podcast hosted by me, Matt Hayes. You can find me at matthayes.com. That's MATHAYES.com, or on just the millennial socials at Hayes on It. HAYES on it. Please go subscribe, review, and share this podcast. And in the meantime, peace be with all y'all.
Hi, Michael Spicer here. Matt Hayes forgot to put my name in the credits of his podcast as the composer, but I'm here to tell you that I wrote the music for his podcast. Whatever it's called, I don't know.